So AMD just did something I honestly wasn't sure they'd ever pull off. For years, everyone has treated NVIDIA like the only serious game in town when it comes to AI hardware, and NVIDIA has been more than happy to let that story run. But this week, CNBC got an exclusive first look inside a lab in Rockdale, Texas, at a machine that changes the conversation. It's called Helios, and it's AMD's first full rack-scale AI system, built to go head-to-head with NVIDIA's Grace Blackwell and its upcoming Vera Rubin. This is a 7,000-pound, roughly $5 million beast, and it's shipping to real customers later this year. And look, I'm going to be upfront with you. I think this is one of the most exciting hardware stories of 2026, and I've been following AMD's comeback for a long time now. So if you like breakdowns, where I actually dig into the specs and give you my honest read instead of just repeating a press release, do me a quick favor and hit that subscribe button before we get going. It genuinely helps the channel more than you'd think, and I promise the next few minutes are worth it. Alright, let's get into what Helios actually is. Here's the thing you need to understand first. For years, AMD sold you chips, individual GPUs that you'd slot into a data center somewhere. Helios is a completely different animal. It's a rack, one massive, integrated, liquid-cooled unit that ties everything together. And that shift matters way more than it sounds. Inside that 7,000-pound frame, you've got 72 Instinct MI455X GPUs and 18 EPYC Venice CPUs. It's built around 18 compute trays, and each tray holds 4 of those GPUs paired with 1 CPU, plus up to 12 networking chips. The whole thing is stuffed with 31 terabytes of HBM4 memory, which is roughly 50% more capacity than NVIDIA's competing Vera Rubin system. AMD is quoting 260 terabytes per second of scale-up memory bandwidth and 43 terabytes per second of scale-out networking. Those are absurd numbers, and they're the kind of numbers that only start to make sense when you're training or running the biggest AI models on the planet. The name is a nice touch too. Helios is named after the Greek god who drags the sun across the sky with 4 horses, and that's basically the pitch. It brings together the 4 things AMD builds in-house: GPUs, CPUs, networking, and software. That in-house part is the whole strategy, and I'll come back to why it's such a big deal. But first, let's talk about who's actually buying this thing, because that's where it gets real. The customers already lining up. This is the part that made me sit up. A brand new first-generation product usually has to fight for attention. Helios did not have that problem. On Monday, Microsoft announced it's deploying Helios racks inside its Azure data centers for frontier model inference, customer AI workloads, and Azure AI services. That's Microsoft, one of the most important cloud buyers on Earth, signing up. And they're not alone. Back in February, Meta committed to using up to 6 gigawatts of AMD GPUs over the long term, with a full gigawatt of Helios racks targeted for deployment by the end of this year. OpenAI is in. Oracle is in, with a commitment to 50,000 AMD GPUs starting in the 3rd quarter, which Oracle describes as the first publicly available AI supercluster built on Helios racks. Even Tata Consultancy Services, India's largest IT company, pledged to use it. And here's a stat that stuck with me. AMD says 8 of the top 10 AI companies are already running workloads on its Instinct GPUs. When you see that customer list before a product has even shipped in volume, that tells you something. These companies are desperate for compute, and they clearly want an alternative to NVIDIA. AMD walked in at exactly the right moment. Helios versus Vera Rubin. Okay, let's do the fun part. How does it actually stack up against NVIDIA's Vera Rubin? Because that's the real fight here. On the spec sheet, AMD wins some genuinely important rounds. Memory is the headline. Each MI455X carries 432 gigabytes of HBM4, compared to 288 gigabytes on NVIDIA's Rubin GPU. At the rack level, that's 31 terabytes versus 20.7 terabytes. Why does that matter? Because memory is usually the bottleneck that forces a big model to get split across multiple GPUs. More memory per chip means you can keep bigger models resident on a single accelerator. And for inference, that's a real advantage. Lisa Su herself said back in May that Helios has meaningful advantages in inference, memory bandwidth, and memory performance. Power efficiency is another one where AMD looks strong. Early comparisons suggest the AMD accelerators draw far less power per chip than NVIDIA's, which in a world where data centers are fighting over every megawatt is a genuinely big deal. On raw peak AI performance though, NVIDIA still edges ahead in FP4, with Vera Rubin quoted around 3.6 exaflops against Helios at roughly 2.9. but flip to FP8 and AMD claws it back and actually leads. So it's a real trade, not a blowout in either direction. Then there's cost, and this is where AMD's whole philosophy comes through. Helios is actually more expensive up front, at least $1 million more per rack than Vera Rubin by analyst estimates. But Forrest Norrod, who runs AMD's data center business, told CNBC they're laser-focused on total cost of ownership and the lowest cost per token. That's the metric that matters to these buyers. It's not the sticker price, it's how much it costs to actually generate an answer from your AI. And Norrod says customers are telling AMD they've nailed it. I like that framing a lot because it's the honest way to compete when you're the challenger. You don't win on price alone, you win on what people actually get for the money. The elephant in the room, CUDA. Now, I'd be doing you a disservice if I made this sound easy, because it isn't. NVIDIA's real moat was never just the chips. It's the software. It's CUDA. For nearly 2 decades, developers have built everything on top of CUDA, and switching away from it is genuinely painful. That's the fortress AMD has to get through. AMD's answer is ROCm, its open-source software stack, now up to version 7 and pushing toward version 8. And they've made real progress here. ROCm now works closely with popular frameworks like PyTorch, so developers can write code once and run it across different hardware. The open source community has pitched in too. But I want to be straight with you. ROCm still trails CUDA in some key optimization libraries, especially for training workloads. This is the piece AMD absolutely has to keep closing, and it's the thing I'll be watching most closely. Here's why I'm still optimistic though. Open is a real selling point right now. A lot of these hyperscalers are tired of being locked into one vendor's proprietary ecosystem. Helios is built on open standards, from the Open Compute Project rack design to Ethernet-based networking. And that flexibility is exactly what companies like Meta and Microsoft have been asking for. When you're spending billions, being able to avoid a single point of dependence is worth a lot. The risks and the real takeaway. Let's be honest about the challenges. This is a first-generation product, and first-gen hardware always carries risk. There are supply questions, with some analysts arguing volume shipments could slip toward 2027, a claim AMD has flatly denied. The power demands are enormous, the costs are enormous, and NVIDIA is not sitting still. It's already in production on Vera Rubin with 8 confirmed cloud partners. Right now, AMD holds only around 4 to 5% of the data center GPU market, while NVIDIA sits above 95%. That gap is massive. But here's the thing. AMD's data center revenue hit $5.8 billion last quarter, up 57% year over year, and analysts at Futurum think it's entirely possible for AMD to capture 20 to 25% of this market over time. That would be enormous, and the timing lines up beautifully because the whole industry is shifting toward agentic AI, those AI systems that actually take actions and run complex workflows. Agentic AI leans hard on strong CPUs, and CPUs are exactly where AMD has always been elite. That's a tailwind blowing right at their strengths. So here's my honest take. Helios is a make-or-break moment, and I think AMD showed up ready. Is it going to knock NVIDIA off its throne overnight? No, and anyone telling you that is selling something. But for the first time in years, NVIDIA has a real credible rival. And competition like this is good for absolutely everyone. It pushes prices, it pushes innovation, and it gives these massive AI companies actual choice. After a decade-long comeback, AMD didn't just show up to the party. They showed up with something that makes NVIDIA sweat a little. And I love to see it. If you got value out of this breakdown, do me a favor and smash that like button. It really does help this stuff reach more people. And if you're not subscribed yet, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Because AMD's Advancing AI event and its next earnings report are right around the corner. And I'll be breaking down exactly what they mean. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.